Hello, and welcome to the Wool and Twine Fiber Studio YouTube channel. My name is Jule, and I'm the dye and maker behind Wool and Twine Fiber Studio, which is a small creative space located here in northern Germany, where I play with botanical dyes and natural yarns. Welcome to a new video. I am showing you a brand new yarn today, which I'm so excited about. And I just hope you are going to enjoy hanging out with me while I chat you through everything. So just as a little intro, I do all of my own yarn bases. I curate them all and I make sure all of the sourcing and making process of them is up to my ethical standards. I'm very particular about how and where I source my yarns and whom I'm working with in terms of, ethics and values and standards and quality as well as sustainability. So a couple of years ago, I transitioned into having only custom spun bases that I fully curate, from sheep to skein, if you will. And that was a bit of, a learning process and a very interesting transition to make because, yeah, it's a special thing to do because especially when you think about how these yarns are completely new and no one knows them, establishing them myself and, creating them myself rather than, relying on well-known bases from different mills. It was a bit of a step into the unknown, but for me, it always felt very right to be in full control over, the whole process and where it comes from and all of that. That was very important to me. And therefore, I decided to transition into fully custom spun bases for my full lineup a couple of years ago. And at this point, I'm very happy to say that all of my yarns are actually custom spun for me and completely exclusive. So, so far about where I went over the past years with this and how I usually approach the yarn design process is something I get questions about quite often, like how do you go about designing the yarns? And there are different ways that I go, like where the inspiration comes from and whether I come from a fiber or with a certain vision or, a gap in my lineup. So I was thinking of doing a dedicated video about how this process is working, in my head as well as in, the practical part of things. Let me know if that's something interesting that you would love to watch. And I'll see if I can execute that. But without further ado, I guess let me start sharing you a little bit more about the backstory of this particular yarn that I want to present to you today. So how this yarn came to life was this time I had the availability of a new to me fiber that opened up a new world for me, kinda, if you will. So for this particular yarn, I came from the fiber when I wanted to design it and then created the vision around what I think it could be suitable for. It sometimes works the other way around, but for this one, it was definitely the fiber that sparked the inspiration. And that is because I was able to source British suri alpaca, which is something incredibly special for me because I usually like 90% of the alpaca, I don't know if it's exactly 90%, but the majority of alpaca fibers is sourced in Southern America, especially for industrial production and like not hobbyist or like small mill productions, but for the industrial scale, alpaca fibers and both huacaya as well as suri alpaca fibers are usually sourced from South America. And since I always try to keep the transportation footprint of my yarns as small as I can, that was not really an option for me. I did not want to have fibers travel across the world just to have the alpaca in my yarn basis, which is why I was so incredibly happy to be able to come across some British sourced suri alpaca, which was so special to me because I have never had an alpaca base due to the transportation in my lineup. And when I came across this British suri alpaca, I was so intrigued and so excited. And what was even better about it is that I was able to get it in a non-white color. because what I do is in my dyeing practice, I very rarely dye on fully white or ecru fibers because I think the natural color of the sheep or alpacas in that sense, in that case, they do add a lot to the depth of the color that I can achieve. And I have kind of made this a bit of like my signature thing that I do dye mainly on non-white fibers. However, usually I only add about 25-30% of darker fleeces into some ecru ones in order to still have a relatively wide variety of shades I can dye on it. But with this blend, when I saw the fiber and I was able to see, like, I saw the natural brown suri alpaca fiber, I thought it would be sad to just add maybe 20% of it to another ecru color. I really wanted to have these beautiful properties in terms of drape as well as color to really stand out. And that's why I decided to make a little bit of a bolder move and create a blend that's 50% British suri alpaca and 50% British source bluefaced leicester. So yeah, it might seem a bit unusual to add 50% of a dark brown fleece into a yarn, but I kind of thought I had this vision when I was doing it that at first I wanted to have the drape properties, and I also really like the natural color of the fleece. But then I also thought, I do wear moody shades all year round, and maybe it would be fun to step out of the traditional way of being like, okay, darker tones in winter and lighter tones in summer, and create a yarn that would enable me to do moody summery shades. Because I think that was not really something I had seen much before, and I was kind of intrigued by the idea. So what I did was that I went for it, and I was like, let's try and make this a really nice drapey yarn that I could still create a lot of moody shades on, and have this as a bit of like my vision was to have this as a bit of like a very drapey, breezy shawl yarn. And that's how it all came to life. And now let me not talk about it just too much and rather show you. So this is Flow. It is called Flow because it has this incredible, I don't know if you can see it in the skein, but it has an incredible drape. So it's very, very drapey and very, very soft. And it kind of inspired me to call it Flow because it was creating this extremely flowy fabric that's almost like, a stream or a current moving through landscapes. So that is how I was inspired to call it Flow. And it is, as said, 50% white or ecru bluefaced leicester, and then 50% brown British sourced suri alpaca, which also results in this beautiful halo. I don't know if you can see that, but it has this stunning halo. As well as incredible drape. So that's what I really love about this yarn and its special properties. And as you can see, it turned out quite dark. And actually, I would say my vision went exactly how I envisioned it to be. The first batch of colors I made for this is actually going to be available on June 19th, 2026 at 8 p.m. CET. Whenever you will watching this video, it might still be up. So just wanted to mention that. And yeah, that is how my vision was for this yarn. And as said, I wanted it to be suitable for summer knits and shawls. And so this one is a 350 meters per 100 grams. So it is a slightly heavier fingering weight. However, gauge-wise, I would say it's turning out more classic fingering than, sport. Technically, this would be in between the fingering and sport weight gauge from its meterage, but I would say it's rather a fingering than a sport weight because it's more of like a denser, let me try to show you maybe in the skein. So it's more of like a denser kind of thread. It's not really plump or necessarily very springy. So that's why it's kind of like more on like the lighter gauge range, I would say. And that is also because alpaca fibers, how they are, is that they, especially suri alpaca, I don't know if you've ever seen what a suri alpaca looks like, but it's not like your traditional fluffy alpaca. They have very long staples, so the fleeces are relatively long, and therefore when you spin them, they don't have trap a lot of air in between, but rather they do get to a slightly sleeker thread, resulting in a bit more of like a thinner gauge, I would say. But yeah, so far about flow and how it kind of came to life. And I also made sure I would prepare some samples for you so you can see how it actually knits up. So for this new yarn launch, I prepared 2 samples so you can get an idea of how it works. And also to give you a bit more variety, because I know that not everyone is very keen on knitting fingering weight on its own. Some of y'all might prefer a slightly heavier gauge. And for this, I prepared 1 sample where I would hold the yarn double and see how it behaves. With how I approach yarn to hold double is I don't do it with every yarn. I would not necessarily do it with a very plump yarn that can result in a slightly stiffer fabric. But with how drapey flow is, I thought I could get away with it, and I swatched and I absolutely loved it. So this is my Terra Vest by Joanna Philippe. I will put her info below. But this is a beautiful vest with this stunning geometrical pattern. You might have seen me work on this in my podcast episodes. It has taken me some time to execute it because I didn't have as much knitting time as I usually do. But this one is made out of flow held double. And I've also made the cardigan version of this pattern, which is why I knew it would work really well with 2 strands held double. And also it was actually designed that way because the closure on the back is technically designed to be then knitted with just 1 strand of yarn instead of 2. So, but I did it different anyway, so just wanted to let you know that it's quite suitable there. But what I did is instead added a little I-cord bow tie, because the ties in the original pattern, they are relatively wide, and I did love the look, but I kind of thought, to make it maybe even more lightweight, I would go with some I-cord bow ties. So that's what I did. And this is a closure in the back, actually. And you add 2 of the little bow ties and tie it up in the back, and then it makes a very classic wardrobe piece, I believe. I will definitely insert some clips of me wearing this one so you can get a better idea of how it behaves. But I hope you can also see the fabric in this one quite well, because you can see how, like, despite this being 2 strands held together, I think you can see how incredibly drapey the fabric still is. And even with the pattern having some slip stitches as the geometrical pattern, it really turned out to be extremely nice and drapey while still holding up its shape. It's not that it's like, I mean, you can see from my little middle crease, I'm sorry, that it does hold up its shape quite well. So this is my Terra Vest. I'll try to show it to you again one more time. And I made this one, I believe, in a size 5, but just because I like my things to be a bit more oversized. And I will double check everything and add all the info to my Ravelry project about, modifications and all of that, and yarn usage and needles and all of that. I think it's always easier to have that all accessible in my Ravelry project, which will be linked down below. But if I'm not mistaken, I ended up using roughly 350 grams for this one, including the bow ties. So yeah, about 350 grams of yarn held double. So I guess that's quite good. And yeah, for a size 5 especially. So that is my Terra Vest. I hope to also show it in depth and talk you through the construction process and all of that in my podcast episode soon. But first of all, let me get to the second sample, which is incredibly cute, I think. So this one is the Relique Kerchief by Lerche of Fiber Tales. and it is this beautiful little pointelle, which is very in right now, I believe. Pointelle little pattern, very simple, um, very easy little shawl. And I think this is so wearable and so cute. And maybe some of you remember that I had posted an Instagram story the other day where I was telling you about how I, envision my sample knits, and I was, putting my planned outfit next to each other. So yeah, y'all seem to have been very excited about that. So this is the outcome: the terra vest in the natural under shade together with this rollica kerchief, and then I will wear this one over my white linen dress, which you will be seeing some footage of me probably wearing that combo in this podcast. But yeah, this literally took about half a skein, I believe, or maybe a little bit more. I think 55 grams or something like that. So, and it's slightly larger than the original because I think Lerke used the lace weight for the original sample. So when you follow the instructions with fingering weight yarn, it will be slightly larger. And so my version is just a tiny bit bigger than hers. But I think it's very nice to be worn around the neck, as just a small spring-like scarf. For me, this is actually the perfect size to wear it. And if I'm not mistaken, this one is the zinnia colorway. And it is this beautiful reddish undertoned color. And as said, it doesn't even take one skein, so that's what I really like about it. And you can just purchase one skein to test if this yarn is for you. But again, here you can see how lovely and drapey it is, especially in a lacy pattern like this one. And I'll try to show you the little pointelle ones up close. They are making this very breezy and easy to wear as well. So yeah, so far about my second little sample for this new yarn. I hope that by showing you some finished pieces in it, it helps you to envision how the yarn behaves a little bit more. But yeah, that is how it turned out. I'm super happy with this, and I'm quite glad that I made the slightly bolder decision to go for a blend that, is not really that common, I'd say. So usually in your alpaca blends, you will see a lot more of them with being like 25 or like 30% alpaca or 40 at max. So, but I'm glad I went this way and that I trusted my vision. And I'm almost, I don't want to say surprised because I envisioned this to be a beautiful yarn, but honestly, it's way more beautiful than I thought it would be. And I'm really excited about it and hope you will be too. So yeah, now I'm happy that I can start wearing my little samples. I usually try to keep them, so they're in good condition until I have showed it to you. But yeah, now I will start wearing them for sure because I love the color. I really like the fit of everything. So it's time to wear the samples now. As always, if you have any questions about this yarn, feel free to reach out to me via email. That's hello@woollentwine.com, and I'll also paste that down below, as sometimes it can be tricky for me to keep up with Instagram DMs. But yeah, that is everything about Flow. I have also curated a whole list of pattern suggestions that I just bundled together in a little Ravelry favorites bundle. I will link that one down below as well, and also in the little wherever corner it might be. Just in case you need a little inspiration and some input on what you can make with this yarn. However, I think due to the fact that it works really well held double as well, I think it's just so nice and so versatile to do it in different yarn weights. So I will add patterns with DK weight gauge into the pattern suggestion list as well. But just keep in mind that you will need to hold the yarn double for this one, as it is a fingering weight technically. But yeah, I guess that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad that you're here and found your way into my little corner of the internet. And I guess until the next one, I am just here to say happy knitting and have a great day. Thank you. Bye.